Hi everyone. Today I have a tutorial for you on the tubular cast-on. This is used in the Cusqueña hat pattern, but is also handy for any project that begins with ribbing. It is a little bit more fiddly than a traditional cast-on, but it gives a nice, neat edge to your ribbing. As we can see here, it doesn't have the same, you can see in these cuffs here, end with a very firm edge that doesn't look as nice as perhaps your store-bought sweaters. With the tubular cast-on, you get an edge that almost looks folded over, which just gives it a little bit more of a neat, tidy look. All right, so the first step is like the long tail cast-on. You're going to pull a length of yarn equal to the number of stitches you want to cast on, which, as we all know, is a bit of an estimate. In this case, I'm just going to be casting on a few stitches for the tutorial. But you would cast on whatever number of stitches are called for in the pattern. And you start by making a slip knot and putting that on the needle. And then you're going to hold the yarn like you would for a long tail cast on. So you're going to grab both strands. Sort of, I usually grab with these two fingers. Some people maybe just do one. And then use your forefinger and thumb to spread the strands apart. Okay, so you have your slip knot on the needle. That's going to count as your first stitch. The way this cast-on differs is that you're actually casting on knit and purl stitches, as opposed to just all the stitches looking the same. So we already have one stitch. We're going to count that as a knit stitch. The next stitch we're going to do is a purl. So we're going to reach the working needle behind that top strand or under, then over that bottom strand, then pull it behind and make sure the top strand goes in front. And that makes a purl stitch. Next, we're going to reach the working needle above and then under the bottom strand, and then above and under the top strand. And that makes a knit stitch. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit there. So you can see the first stitch that we did has a purl bump, and the second does not. So you're going to continue that way all the way across for however many stitches you need. So under, over, around, and then above and under, around. Under, over, and then you bring that yarn forward, above and under, and you bring that yarn behind. A couple more times. Reach behind the top strand so that the yarn goes over your needle, then reach over the bottom strand and behind and pull that yarn in front. Then over and under, put that yarn behind. And since we are usually for ribbing using an even number of stitches if we're working in the round, you want to end with the purl stitch. Okay? couple more. Okay. So now when you get to the end, to secure that last stitch, you can just take the working yarn and wrap it a little bit around. Now even though, so I'm going to use my fingers to hold that so this keeps the stitch firm. Even though we are going to be working in the round, in the case of the Cusqueña hat, we cast on flat, and then we're going to work 2 foundation rows before we join in the round. Okay, we've cast on our stitches and now we're ready to work our first 2 foundation rows. Get a little bit of this extra yarn out of here. Okay, so when you've turned your work, you can see on this side that some of the stitches have little purl bumps and others don't. So they look already like knit and purl stitches. And we're going to work them differently. On this first foundation row, you're going to knit all the knit stitches through the back loop, and you're going to slip all the purl stitches with the yarn in front. Okay, so the first stitch is a knit. So we're going to knit through the back loop. The second stitch, you can see now maybe a little more clearly, has that little purl bump. So we're going to slip with the yarn in front. You can also see that the knit stitches are placed on the needle backward, which is why we're knitting through the back loop. Knit through the back loop, slip one with yarn in front, knit through the back loop, slip with yarn in front all the way across. And we end with a slip one, and we turn our work. And this second foundation row is going to be much the same, but now the knit stitches are not misoriented. They're oriented correctly on the needle, so we're going to knit all the knit stitches and slip the purls again with yarn in front. Knit, slip with yarn in front, knit, slip with yarn in front all the way across. Okay, now we've worked 2 foundation rows, and from this point forward, you will work in a normal ribbing pattern. If you're going to be working in the round, then you just join to start working in the round. And when you are done your project, you'll come back and use this tail to seam up those first 2 rows. Okay, but we're going to work just a regular ribbing now. And I will just work a few rows and then show you how that cast-on edge looks. Okay, now I've worked a few rows, and you can see that the ribbing looks pretty much like normal ribbing, but this bottom edge almost looks like it's folded under, like you have done a folded hem. Folded hems are a little bit tricky and labor intensive. So with just using a different cast on, you get a similar effect, It's a very neat and tidy edge for things that begin with ribbing. Still has plenty of flexibility and just gives a nice extra professional looking touch to your knits. Thanks for joining me.